Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this big old guy right here. This is the Spyderco Knives Shabazz Respect Bowie knife. Oh, yeah. First off, though, two things. I apologize for the seagulls. It is way too damn hot to shut the windows, but I've got a lot of amorous seagulls going on out there, so that's going to add a little bit of flavor to this review. Second thing, I want to thank Spyderco for sending this guy along. You know, Spyderco, we've got a longer-term relationship here. I've told them, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. I might call it a gem, might call it junk, and indeed, I've said both about their products. But they still sent this guy along, and in fact, I reached out to him after Blade Show, because when I first saw this guy in, catalogs and whatnot, I wasn't that super interested, right? It's a little outside my normal wheelhouse. And frankly, just from afar, it didn't look like kind of something I was interested in. But then I handled one at Blade Show. It was like, oh, that's why. And so I reached out and I said, yeah, I'd like to check one of these guys out. They sent it along. But nevertheless, we have to assume this is the best quality controlled one of these guys ever. And I'm doing my best not to let the fact this was sent to me affect my review. Next thing, size comparison. Spyderco Delica. As you can see here, the Spyderco Delica fits entirely within the blade of this particular pocket knife. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2. See, yeah, there we go, both in the frame. This is a substantially larger knife than that. And here it is against the Ontario Rat #1, which again, we could fit entirely underneath the blade of the Spyderco Respect here. This is, for those of you keeping track at home, a big freaking knife. In fact, if we put my ruler on the blade here, you can see here that it is longer than that. So this has an exceptionally big whole freaking blade. Next thing, this is a fixed blade knife. In case you can't tell, there is no way to fold this knife that doesn't involve cracking it in half. And, that means a couple of things. A, it means I'm a little outside my comfort zone. I don't generally take a look at fixed blades, but I'll do my best here. And the other thing that it means is there is no disassembly. And in fact, these screws here appear to be thread locked, down there, because there's really no need to ever remove them. But, yeah, there we go, so keep that in mind. Then, finally, actually, a couple of other little, one other note here is that this is a knife that's maybe a little bit difficult for me to review, because my normal pattern is that I carry, a knife around for a couple of days before I do my review. The problem is I live in urban San Diego, and if I throw this guy on my belt, it is technically legal, but there are many things that are legal that are not a great idea. Much like flipping off a puppy, this was only going to lead to sadness if I were to carry this guy around. So what I did instead is I used it a fair amount around the house. I used it in the kitchen. I used it in a bunch of different places. And I found jackassing tasks for it. Breaking down boxes, attacking a piece of firewood, that kind of thing. And so that's my area of experience here. But what I have not done with this is serious heavy-duty bushcrafting and whatnot. That's not what I do to start with, right? So anyways, that's what's going on here. Oh, and then finally, this is not a Spyderco edge. This is my own edge that I put on the knife with some freehand stones. So anyways, this is the RESPCT. Let's find the good, great, bad, and the ugly. RESPCT, there we go. Let's sock it to you, sock it to you. That's an Aretha Franklin reference for you damn kids out there. On the good side, to start with, this is made in Golden, Colorado, USA earth. And in fact, this was apparently a substantial concern for Sal Glesser. He said that he just didn't feel right as he and I were talking about this at Blade Show. He said he didn't feel right making this guy overseas. It's a Bowie knife. That is sort of the American blade, if you think about it. So it's made in Golden. And honestly, that's great. I'm cheering for, factories in my home country, as I'm sure you are in yours. However, what's maybe more interesting about it is that means that Golden now has the ability to do this kind of crazy CNC grinding, and that's exciting to me. The more that I can see Spyderco's Golden factory, picking up the really cool machining tricks, the better, because that means more great knives made there, and I think it's one of their better factories. So that's a beautiful thing for this knife, but also for Spyderco in general, I think. Next thing, this has weird ergonomics, but they're good. This knife can be held in a couple of ways. It can be held back here, which is absolutely fine, in a hammer grip. Not much for a saber grip with this blade guard. However, that's not what it's meant to do. You can also choke back a little bit if you really need to get a good whack on something. But the way that this is most comfortable for me is exactly like this, where you've got your this little guard here, right around your thumb. You got your index finger up in here. And in this case, it's very, very well balanced. It's exceptionally good. Just, it's a lively blade in the hand. This works really well ergonomically ergonomically speaking. So, although if you are a big fan of a saber grip, this one's going to leave you behind, generally speaking, this hammer grip here is great. Big fan of that. Next thing, this guy has actually a reasonably nice pouch that it comes with. It's got this little guy right here, which sure looks like it was originally a pistol case, but they put a Spyderco logo on the side of it. It's all fuzzy on the inside there. And in addition to that pouch, it comes with an actual sheath. A leather sheath right here. We'll talk a little bit more about this sheath later on, but you know what? It's got the basic features you want. It, holds the blade, which is exactly the basic feature of a sheath. It, pops itself shut there. When the knife is in here, it's secure. It also has options for a vertical mount, or potentially, if your belt is very thin, a horizontal mount going through that away. But either way, it's a fine little sheath, and I appreciate the fact that they give you both the sheath as well as the nicer carrying case for a bigger piece there. So that's good. Next thing, this has a very nice blade. Considering that it is basically all blade, it better freaking be nice, but the steel on this guy is CPM 154, which is different from 154 CM. It's a powder metallurgy version, but it is a very tough steel. It is a relatively easy to sharpen steel, although this feels like it's been run relatively hard based on my sharpening. It is and it takes a stupid sharp edge. It strops up so freaking nicely. And then couple that with the sharpening choil on here, the super abrupt plunge grind, which is kind of another really common Spyderco-ality of this little guy right here. And so, although it's not the thinnest behind the edge, it absolutely does cut. I've used this guy in my kitchen. I can, put this through paper, etc. It is absolutely and totally a beautiful thing in terms of that. And so the blade on this guy is absolutely good to go. I like this blade a great deal. And then finally, on the good side, this guy has a very nice blade finish. And I'm going to see if I can show that off here for a second. Kind of clean this guy off. Just a second here. Should have done this ahead of the review, but hey, hashtag not a brilliant man. I'm just putting a little bit of glasses cleaner on here, because often that is good at restoring the prismaticity, whoopsies, the prismaticity of a blade. But what we can see here, if we zoom in a little bit, hopefully we'll be able to get this, is that this finish is not kind of your conventional belt finish. In many ways, this feels like a computer grind. I wouldn't be shocked to find out. I'm wondering if I'm going to be able to get this on camera. But there is actually, if you look directly down the blade, there is a way in which it gets prismatic, where you can see little tiny, oh, here we go. Maybe you'll be able to see this, maybe you won't. But where you can see almost the interactions of the little, the peaks on this guy lead to a really weird phenomenon that's, deep in optics someplace. Here, I'll zoom out. Maybe that'll help me. Either way, maybe you see it, maybe you're not, but it's freaking gorgeous, and it's something I completely didn't expect. But even putting that aside, the blade itself just has a very attractive finish to it, with the CNC, it looks like CNC lines, the spider here. I mean, it's a beautifully finished blade, even if it's not a conventional finish, and it's far from the sort of forged finishes that you're used to on these big old Bowie knives. It's a really cool one, and it's one that I really appreciate just overall. A nice blend, because you can see there is some mirroritude to it, even outside of the edge but it's a beautiful finish. And so to me, at least, all of this is the good, is that it has a very nice finishing. It has a nice blade. It comes with a pouch and a sheath. It has got weird ergonomics because of this guard here, but they're absolutely good to go. And it is made in golden, and that's a beautiful thing. On the great side to me is the style. That's the thing that kind of caught me off guard. If you look at this guy in a catalog, and, I'm not generally a fixed blade person, right? It's not usually where I go in life. And, when I was just seeing it in the catalog from above, it looks fine. It looks interesting, I guess, but it's not like, oh my God. But the thing is, then you actually see it in person, and all of the various elements come into view. From a bunch of different angles, this starts getting really cool. I really like the style of this because, it's a Bowie knife, 100%. You look at this and there's nothing but, wow, that's a Bowie knife. And like my wife, I love it deeply, but she's not the most knife nerdy person ever. But I showed that to her and said, wow, I didn't know you did Bowie knives. Like, okay, so it's recognizable. It's a thing. And she actually really loves the design of this guy too. But anyways, it's got this weird, like, Blade Runner style futuristic Bowie thing. And it's with these subtle grind lines, and then couple in the fact that there's a lot of geometry here. It feels much more geometric, like straight line, All of these things. With these abrupt plunge grinds, it just feels very different than your classical Bowie. It feels much more high-tech, much more futuristic than most, but it's still very much recognizably a Bowie. And then add to that the fact that it has all of these conventional Spyderco design touches. The little hole, which I know is going to drive some people crazy, but hey, another place for your lanyard, right? Sorry. As well as the abrupt plunge grind as well. It just feels very much like a cool future Bowie. I asked Sal about this because, handling this knife, it was just like, wow. There were a lot of thoughts put into this little guy. Every little element of this, it feels like it's been agonized over. And I asked Sal in an email, and I said, you've been thinking about this one for a while? He said, and I quote this part, I began the design when I was studying forging in the 80s, early 90s. I've refined it literally for decades. I carved wood variations, made numerous prototypes, and eventually were able to make it in golden, which was a requirement of mine. An American Bowie knife needed to be made in the USA. It truly was an endeavor of passion. Now, look, this is entirely subjective. You're welcome to tell me to just shut up. Sock it to me in the comments down below. Get it? Aretha reference? Anyways, but nevertheless, that passion shines through. You can see here that this is sort of a design thesis, if you will, from Sal Glesser. And given that he's a knife designer that I respect, I don't know. I just like the design of this guy substantially. Maybe you don't. That's totally fine. And if you are a traditional Bowie fan, this is probably going to rub you the wrong way. But at least for me, not being a traditional Bowie fan, this is doing it for me. So to me, that's what's great here, is this is a freaking gorgeous knife. On the bad side, there are definitely some downsides to this guy. I mean, to start with, it's a little bit big for my everyday life. In fact, it's freaking huge for my everyday life. I mean, okay, hold on. Let me get my freaking yardstick here so I can actually measure the blade length here. We are coming in here just a hair under 8 inches. That's a big old freaking knife. Oh, my God. So there's that. It also has very thick blade stock. I've complained about thick blade stock before on the channel, but this is probably... yeah, here it is compared to the PM2. This is 0.3-inch blade stock, which is... actually, that feels even a little bit low. I read that online someplace, but... I guess, yeah, 0.3-inch blade stock. It's really, really freaking thick. It's also a very heavy knife. I'll see if I can get this onto my scale here. Hopefully it'll work. Nah, unfortunately. Here, I'll throw it on I'll throw it on the postal scale. Call it a day. We'll go postal on this. Ooh, with that knife, that's scary. 12.7 ounces. That's freaking big. It's a heavy knife. And this also has a lunchroom acceptability factor of absolutely nope. I mean, like, you take this guy out, you get a little old ladies diving under the freaking table. It's ridiculous. And so, yeah, there you go. But those are kind of inherent elements of this knife. I mean, the way it's designed, those are going to be the nature of the beast. So, I can't really ding him too hard there. There are some things I can ding him for. To start with, it didn't come super sharp. Now, I understand that I think for a lot of people, this is going to be more of a display piece. This is going to be something you set up on your bookshelf and you're like, wow, that's a beautiful knife. And so having it being razor sharp is not necessarily the highest priority. But this was actually a knife I found the need to sharpen myself before I was using it. I mean, it was okay. It would have cut things, but I wanted to sharpen it. Unfortunately, the KME system, it's a sharpening system that I like a lot, actually let me down here because it's got 12 ounces. Pardon me, it's a 12-ounce blade with a big, thick spine here. So this has actually set me down the path to freehand sharpening. And as you can see, it's gone pretty well. But nevertheless, this definitely required some sharpening to be really, really sharp in the sense that a lot of Spydercos haven't in the past. So there you go. Next thing, sheath on this guy. It works fine, but it doesn't have that much versatility. It's either you can do it inside the waistband, where actually this little stud here catches the corner of your pants. And in fact, I think that's how Sal Glesser was carrying his at Blade Show, which is entertaining. But nevertheless, you can put this guy inside the waistband if you felt the need. It's a little uncomfortable. Or you can carry it vertical on the waistband right above there, but there's no option to angle it, to cant it at all. This is times where I kind of wish that there was a tech lock involved here, that this sheath was somehow, but they're also trying to go old school, and I get that. And so there you go, and you need to realize as well that, I usually use an 1.5-inch belt. That's about as big as this is going to take. Any bigger, you're going to have some trouble. So, there you go. Next thing, I actually needed to do a little bit of work right here to get this sheath button to fit. When I first got this sheath, actually, there was a little bit of a, well, I know it's a burr on metal, but there was a little bit of extra leather in here that I actually needed to clean out. I needed to carve out a little bit of leather such that this would cleanly go down over this button here. And you can see it's still a little bit of a force. Now, at some level, that's a good thing, right? You want it to be securely in there, but at another level, that wasn't a great out-of-the-box experience. So, hopefully whatever caused that was an isolated issue rather than a long-term thing. Next thing, some people have complained that this knife is not a full tang knife, and that is indeed true. Seen some pictures online. It comes down, roughly to about here. Down here, this is just the G10. And by the way, look at the G10 handle here. It doesn't look quite seamless because it isn't, sanded to be seamless, but at the same time, it's pretty damn seamless in the hand. But this is not a full tang knife. There are some people who are religiously offended, so to speak, that a Bowie knife would not be full tang. And they're welcome to be. But the thing is, the balance on this knife is pretty much exactly where I want it to be, so the ends in this particular case seem to justify the means to me. So, there you go. Next thing, this is a pretty thick edge by Spyderco standards. I'll see if I can show this off, but you can see here, even with a little bit of reprofiling, and I have done a little bit of reprofiling on this guy in my resharpening, this guy has a pretty thick edge. And compared to a lot of their stuff, even coming out of Golden, this is not going to be God's gift to cutting. At some level, it's a big, thick freaking Bowie knife. The biggest thing you're not going to be doing, some mega tomato slices, and actually it's not so bad for that anyways. But this has a big thick edge with big thick blade stock, and so this is going to be much better suited to the kind of chopping and jackassy cutting that you're going to be doing in the outdoors relative to your indoor sorts of boxes and envelopes fare, although it does work just fine for that. But I do kind of wish at some level the grind were a little more aggressive, but I also understand wanting to have a really thick edge geometry for something that you might be chopping with. I'm not a fixed blade reviewer, and I'm not sure how most Bowies come, so I'll go on ahead and give them a pass there. I don't know. Then finally, on the bad side, and probably the worst thing for a lot of people is the price. This guy comes in at $370. This is a big chunk of change. And what I'm hearing a lot of people say about that is that, oh my God, you can get so many great fixed blades below that price. And yes, 100% absolutely. You can get a lot of really good stuff from companies like, Cold Steel has, the Frontier Bowie or something like that for $200. EC's got, their entire line. I have one of my other fixed blades is an EC Laser Strike. You can get a Spyderco. In fact, all of Spyderco's fixed blade lineup, excepting the Don Dow and the Zuma, are all coming in under that price point. You can get a bunch of stuff even by like Bowie, although this actually comes with a sheath. Just saying, Bowie or Bussy, whatever the heck they are. Either way, you can do a whole bunch of stuff out there, even within Spyderco or from other companies, that will get you a great fixed blade under this price. That said, I don't know that this is meant to compete with those kinds of things. No one's going to be looking at this and going, well, let's see here. I need a good practical outdoors cutting tool. It's either going to be the Spyderco Waterway or the Respect Bowie. I don't see that as being the case. In fact, I see the competition of this guy as being against things like, custom Bowie knives. If you're walking around Blade Show and you're looking at a bunch of, I want a big badass Bowie, and you walk to a bunch of tables, you see, 800, 900, 700, 800, 900, 700, and then you come to a table and you find this is going to feel actually kind of like a bargain. So I'm not saying that the price is amazing. I sure wouldn't mind if it were a little bit lower, but given that it has its own unique style, and given that it's really competing against a segment that is predominantly custom, I can see this actually being interesting for a bunch of people if you're loving that style. So, to me at least, that's what's bad here, is that it's $370. It's a little thick behind the edge. Actually, it's pretty thick behind the edge. You needed to do a little work to let you get the sheath button fitting here. The sheath doesn't have all that much versatility for carrying. It's not a full tang knife, which some people will find ugly if they're more purist than I am. It didn't come super sharp. It has a lunchroom acceptability factor of, oh my God, a weapon! It is heavy with big blade stock and a big knife overall. There's nothing super ugly here. I wasn't a fan of having to make that modification, but that was literally a minute and a half of my life I think I used the Delica for it, so it wasn't a big deal. But aside from that, nothing ugly here, so let's go into the final conclusion. So, final conclusion, this is kind of an odd piece. Not just an odd piece for me to review. I don't generally do fixed blade knives, although I'm doing more of them lately. I'm starting to find a little more of the joy. But it's just an odd piece in terms of its expectations. At one level, it's a very impressive knife. It's American-made. It's very nice in the hand. It's got a really neat blade. It's got a just gorgeous freaking blade finish on there. And it has a seriously distinctive style. There is no other Bowie knife out there that looks like this one, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And especially if you are a fan of Spyderco, and so you love seeing the idea of a Bowie knife that has some of those same things that are present in some of the knives that you love. You know, if we put these guys next to each other, there is a clear, oh, here, let me get them both on frame there. There is sort of a clear DNA match between the two of them. Paternity test freaking confirmed. But anyways, so at that level, it's actually very impressive. But of course, it's not all unicorns and rainbows here. I mean, it's big, it's huge, it's absolutely ginormous, it's thick, it's heavy, it's gonna send old ladies diving under the table in the lunchroom. The sheath is a little bit old school, for better and for worse. It's a bit thick at the edge, and $370, that's a chunk of change. In many ways, this is sort of one of those matter of perspective knives. If you are just after a fixed blade, you can get a lot of fixed blades for $370. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that if that's all you're after is a fixed blade knife, that this is the choice for you. No, you can get a bunch of stuff, and a bunch of them, the sky is the freaking limit. You are getting very easily into custom fixed blade knives in $370 range. Perhaps not big old Bowies, but from some makers, absolutely perhaps. And so that, absolutely perhaps. Okay. And if you're looking for a new kitchen knife, no, this is not going to be it. I used it in the kitchen. That was very entertaining. But no, generally not. If you're wanting a traditional old school Bowie, again, this isn't that. It's not really trying to be that. It is clearly identifiable as a Bowie knife, I think. But it is not a traditional Bowie by a freaking mile. In fact, I would argue that this knife is someplace in that domain between, functional knife making, which Spyderco normally does, and art knife, and collector's piece. It is most clearly a knife, and it does absolutely work in a lot of knifey situations. I put this through its paces, or at least to the extent that I put anything through its paces. I understand that comment is. But nevertheless, I use this in a bunch of knifey situations, and I can confirm that it is a knife, and particularly once I sharpened it up a little bit, put an aggressive edge on this, oh yeah, that absolutely works. But for me, actually, I think this knife is maybe best appreciated as a collector's piece. A uniquely Spyderco take on the Bowie knife, a modern and kind of high-tech looking Bowie design. Really, and part of this, you're welcome to cry bias, because the aesthetics of this just do it for me in a profound way. As a high-tech sort of person, with also a respect for old-school knife making, this is right aimed at my heart, not in the stabby sense. And so, and it's a beautiful knife in my estimation. Personally, I'm actually really torn on this guy. I mean, I find the knife absolutely beautiful. I'm not torn about that. It's been a joy to have around, and I think for now, I am going to let it stick around. I'm going to put it in a place of some beauty and display in my life, and I think I may end up keeping this. And when I do my next charity giveaway, I'm going to see what happens here, because I may end up just making a donation myself and holding on to this one, because it is a very impressive piece. But that's what it is. It's a very impressive piece. It's a piece of functional art, an awesome design. And so I think that this guy absolutely is not going to be for everybody. But for the folks who love the style, for the folks who love the overall approach here, well, let's put it this way. This will end up in the collections of lots of boys, and girls out there. And if you disagree, I hope you'll share your opinions below respectfully. Okay, all you go take care, TCB, another Aretha Frank, and let's go. Sorry, guys. And have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.